Coming up on the Lead Security Podcast with Preston Hocker.
In order to move the needle, you're going to need some support. If you follow the tips that I'm going to give you today, you're going to be able to get closer to your goal. Welcome back to the Lead Church Security Podcast, where we are committed to helping people just like you create a church community that is both inviting and secure. If you're a volunteer security director, this episode is for you. If you feel like you're the only one in your community that is security minded, this episode is for you. See, I know it can be difficult to get some support from a pastor or a community whose security plan kind of consists of, well, you trusting God and hoping for the best. But we know that trusting in God doesn't give us the right to fall asleep at the wheel. See, I'm reminded of all of the verses throughout Scripture where we are instructed to do good. Scriptures like Psalm 37:3 that tells us to trust in the Lord and do good. Then there's Hebrews 13:16, which tells us to do good and share what we have. See, I believe keeping people safe is among the best things that we can do, especially for our communities. And our communities ought to be excited when members take interest in keeping its most vulnerable attenders safe. Now, before we jump into this conversation, make sure you subscribe to this channel. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content there. Also, our team is looking at hosting some free Lead Church Security seminars around the U.S. If you would be interested in some free teaching, in-person instruction from one of our professionals in areas such as situational awareness, building a lasting volunteer team, I know that can be a struggle, but we have some tools that we'd like to put in your hands. If you are interested in learning about cybersecurity, because that feels like it's so out of reach, or even how to manage an active shooter. I know a lot of us think that we know what we would do, but there are correct and incorrect ways to manage those kinds of events. If you're interested in those kinds of things, please comment your city and state in the comment section. Now, let's go ahead and jump into this conversation. Today, I want to give you 4 tips for gaining support from your pastor or from your church leadership. You might not need a massive budget to move your needle in the right direction, but there are some things that you're going to need in order to create a community that is both inviting and secure. See, maybe you already have some surveillance cameras on the exterior of your church, but you could really use some in your kids' areas. And I know some people are even thinking, why would I need a camera in my kids' area? Really, honestly, you need cameras in your kids' areas before you get your cameras on the exterior. And the reason is because kids are the most vulnerable, and we want to keep them protected. We want to keep them protected even more than we keep our properties protected. Now, you might want to go with a dummy camera outside. That way you're giving the idea that there is some surveillance, which will keep people with malicious intent away from your building. But in order to protect your kids, you want to make sure you get some good cameras on the interior in your classrooms, in your kids' ministry area. And that's not a knock at any of your teachers. That's not a knock at your kids' pastor. It's actually helping keep everybody safe, because if you work with kids, you know the stress, you know the damage that can be done when one child makes an accusation, especially if that accusation is unfounded. So it's great to have those cameras, and you might have some on the outside, but you want to get some on the inside. Maybe you have a decent sized team already. You've already got some people that are ready to stand in the gap, but you don't have any way to communicate. You don't have any two-way radios. Forget about having really good ones. You don't even have decent ones, and those are going to be really important. In order to move the needle, you're going to need some support. If you follow the tips that I'm going to give you today, you're going to be able to get closer to your goal. You might want to grab a pen. You might want to grab a pad of paper, or just, I don't know, maybe get your notes section in your phone or on your iPad ready, because you're going to want to take some notes. If you want to get closer to your goal, you need to present the importance of security at your church. See, not everyone thinks like you or like me. They don't share the same concerns that we have. Some of your concerns might exist because of the events that you've had in your past, or maybe it's because of how you were brought up. Whatever the reason, it suffices to say that not everyone is aware that a safety or a security team is necessary at a church, which is why you need to communicate the presence of that need. My advice would be for you to highlight the necessity of a team by discussing the real threats that churches face today. Real threats such as vandalism, medical emergencies, cyber attacks, child predators that we know love to use churches as a feeding ground, theft. And with elections coming up, both legal and illegal protests are threats to our congregations. I don't really like to harp on what we call active attacks or active shooters, but unfortunately, they are a real viable threat today. While you're communicating the validity of all of these threats, take some time to talk about the importance of creating a safe environment for worship, and that having a safety or a security team actually creates another place for members to serve, especially for men to serve. See, a lot of men kind of feel like they fall through the cracks. And I'm not saying that security teams or safety teams are only for men, but I think it's worth noting that a lot of men find their place serving on security teams. That actually brings me to my next tip on this list, which is to demonstrate the benefits of a healthy security team. Take time to explain how a well-trained security team can actually enhance the church's overall safety, and that it provides a peace of mind to the congregation when the team is healthy and it is presented in a correct way. Emphasize the importance of teamwork and how a healthy team can create ministry momentum within your congregation and even establishes a stronger first impression for your community as a whole. We know when somebody comes for the first time, we love to have greeters. We love to have ushers out there shaking hands and making sure people are feeling welcome. Well, when you have a well-trained security team that knows how to make a community feel safe, but also inviting, you're enhancing that first impression, which is great for the entire community. Remember, a good security team member shouldn't look intimidating. People shouldn't be apprehensive around them. Really, a good team member is marked whenever a newcomer or a visitor mistakes your security team member as an usher or a greeter. Now, the third tip we have is to share success stories. Stories are way better than statistics. If you go and you tell somebody that 50% of this or 70% of this, they're just going to hear numbers. It's going to get jumbled and then it's going to get tossed out. Provide examples of other churches that have success stories. Instead of providing a bunch of stats, provide examples of other churches that have successfully implemented security teams and the positive impact that it's had on their community. If you're struggling to come up with some stories, use some of the stories that I reference on the Lead Security YouTube channel every single week. You can talk about the multiple medical emergencies we've had in the last couple of months that our team handled like absolute professionals. We had this lady who was unresponsive and who had an extremely weak pulse. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know at the time, but she was actually suffering from a stroke. We were able to notice, first of all, we recognized that something was wrong. If we didn't have a team that was trained to look around and make sure people were okay, somebody might have thought that she just fell asleep. But our team was trained to be situationally aware, and our person noticed that something was off. And because we noticed that she was an anomaly, we were able to get this lady medical care that she needed to save her life. See, our team operated in such a way that not only was she able to get the care that she needed, but nobody in the main sanctuary where this emergency was taking place knew that there was an emergency going on until the EMTs had to come into our sanctuary to transport her to the hospital. Some people are apprehensive of security teams because for so many people, that means you're going to have a couple good old boys walking around with guns on their hips, acting like the church sheriffs. Now, when you highlight the safety side of the team, you talk about medical emergencies and saving lives, you get a lot less resistance. Now, the final tip I have on this list is to propose a detailed security plan. Present a detailed, comprehensive security plan that outlines the roles, the responsibilities, and the training that is required for a security team. If that feels overwhelming, I understand. Head over to our website, leadsecurity.com, and check out our membership where we have 64 training videos, 52 team training moments, which are incredibly valuable for making your team feel significant. You want to kill a team? Make them feel insignificant. You want to grow a team and have a healthy team? Make sure they feel like they are a part and that they are needed. On top of that, we've got 52 scriptures and vision cards that we use with our team. I use those on Sunday prior to service. We've got more than 40 downloadable guides, including how to run your own training days. We've also got 12 monthly team gatherings and 4 quarterly trainings. I'm telling you, this membership is comprehensive. It's easily the most comprehensive training that you are going to find on the internet. On top of all of that, also include potential scenarios and how the team would respond, demonstrating preparedness and professionalism. If you broaden your scope, meaning you don't just focus solely on active shooter scenarios, you focus on natural disasters. What would you do in the case of a hurricane or a tornado or an earthquake, whatever is specific to your region? If you focus on those kinds of things, or heart attacks, which happen so often in our society and our culture, if you focus on those kinds of things, you're going to gain more support. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging with me through this entire episode of the Lead Church Security Podcast. If you're still here, you likely found some value. If you did, make sure you like this podcast. If you're on YouTube, like the video. And if you still haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content that we're putting out monthly on podcasts and weekly over on YouTube. Thanks again for joining me. I'll catch you in the next one.